Can you please elaborate on why you advise against cohabitation before marriage?
Well, so why would I advise against cohabitation before marriage? Well, the simple answer to that question is there's plenty of evidence that it's a bad idea. And I just mean factual evidence to begin with, although I think there are other reasons. People who live together and then get married are more likely to get divorced, not less likely. And that's a really interesting fact because it flies in the face of what you might think of as a kind of pragmatic common sense, you know, because you might think, well, you don't buy a car without taking it out for a test drive. Right, and everyone laughs because that seems obvious, but then, you know, woman's not a car, and neither is a man, and really, like seriously, really not an object. And so it isn't obvious at all that that metaphor applies, even though it's, at first shallow glance, it seems obviously true. Well, but if it's obviously true, then you might say, well, why are people who live together before they get married more likely to get divorced? And one possible answer to that is, well, people who are more likely to get divorced are the same people who are more likely to live together rather than to get married, and that's possible. It's very difficult to separate those two things out, but in some sense it doesn't matter. What the facts reveal is that if the goal is to learn what you need to learn so that you can decide who you should marry more effectively, or learn how to act if you do get married more effectively, and the goal is that your marriage will be better and last, then it doesn't work. And that's a strange truth. And then you might ask yourself, well, why? Why doesn't it work? It's also the case, by the way, that the more sexual partners, the larger the number of sexual partners that someone has had before they get married, the more likely they are to get divorced as well. Women who are cohabiting with men are generally not very happy about the fact that the relationship is not moving towards marriage. Now, I think there's a bunch of reasons for that. Women seem to suffer more emotionally as a consequence of sexual activity outside of a committed relationship. You can imagine why that is. Women experience more negative emotion than men on average in general, but also women pay a much higher, sex is much riskier for women than it is for men, obviously. And in the men who I've talked to about that about their partners' displeasure with the current unstable nature of the relationship, often say something like, well, we don't need a piece of paper to indicate our commitment to each other.